Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is not Alan Saunders. By now, you know that is Nick Farabaugh filling in for Alan Saunders, who, unlike, and we will get into this very soon, a lot of Steelers was a DNP today for Steelers now, a big DNP for Alan Saunders. Nick, what's going on?
Not much, Smitty. Yeah, big DNP for Alan Saunders out with a non-injury related thing is what I'm going to say. He's NIR. Veterans Day off. Just like Pat Pete and Isaac Seumalo needs those bet days off. So the youngsters stepping in here. It's a good way to get me first team reps.
Need the reps.
Yeah,
You're Joey Porter Jr. at this
exactly.
moment in time. Before we get into anything, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you're listening somewhere that is not YouTube, be sure to leave us a 5-star review there as well. Nick, I mentioned Alan Saunders at DNP. That wasn't the case for a lot of Steelers that popped up on the injury report yesterday, which I think had a lot of people concerned. Where are we at with the guys that missed practice yesterday? Namely, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Darnell Washington. You mentioned 2 guys that got vets days off, but there was some guys. What was it? A total of 6 guys or something that missed with
Yeah, 6 guys
injury
set
related stuff.
up.
Yeah. So where are we at with those guys?
Yeah, I think most of them are on track to play. Minkah is back. Kazee's back.
Casey.
Washington's back. Golden is back. And Gunner, I believe, took another step in the concussion protocol. So he did not practice yesterday, so he's a limited participant today. I kind of have a hard time seeing him playing on Sunday. I think he just needs another day.
Yeah, you're saying concussion related, right?
Yeah,
Because I think you could. I didn't know if you were saying even like from a
yeah,
non-injury
no,
related thing with the
I,
kickoff blunder, with the fumble.
no, I think concussion related. He's probably not going to play.
Okay.
And then Larry is just kind of Larry, and I
Yeah.
don't even care if Larry's out there anymore because I just assume he could like log 3 did not practices, be listed as questionable, and I'd be like, well, I guess Larry's going to play because it's kind of what Larry has done the past year. And listen, if he has performances like he did on Sunday, I mean, whatever, he was great on Sunday. So um, Larry was like the only one that I felt like was out there or didn't do that much or whatever. So it's pretty good news, I think. You're probably going to get a lot of LPs today, limited practices on that report, but I expect most of those to get upgraded to full tomorrow.
That would be very good news. Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously a big topic of conversation. Not only is he so important to the Steelers, obviously spent time in the hospital following that game with that chest injury, was puking on the sidelines, went to the hospital for evaluation. Got some good news about him being released. Obviously, we're talking here, taking the right steps, trending towards playing. He said himself he's going to play, but he was the topic of conversation for a hit in that game as well. He was the one that put the hit on Nick Chubb, that devastating knee injury, which I can't help but get that image. It's just staying in my mind, Nick. First off, that's the worst thing that I've seen like actually happen in front of me. Obviously, I wasn't in Cincinnati when the Ryan Shazier injury happened or anything like that. I think this is the most devastating injury I've seen live. It's been a big topic of conversation though. And he went on today to defend it himself. We also heard from a member of the Cleveland Browns, Grant Delpit, say that he didn't see an issue with the hit. Unfortunate result, of course, but he didn't see an issue with the hit. Where did you stand on it, and what exactly was the wording used by Minkah in defending the hit?
Yeah, very long explanation over about 4 questions from Minka. Pretty simple explanation though. It was that when you actually watch the play and like in how game speed works, because everyone that's kind of putting it around as being dirty watches that slow mo angle, right? And
Yeah.
they say, well, Cole Holcomb's on his back, but if you look at it from the fast replay, Minka's already going down towards Chubb's legs when Holcomb jumps on his back, and I think that's something that's overlooked. So Minkah said basically once he got through that hole, got through the second level, he was like, I'm going low because he's assuming before Holcomb comes on that that's going to be a one-on-one tackle, right? So you got to take out Nick Chubb's momentum. And he's like, and I think, Tim Benz of the Trib directly asked him, um, what would you say to those people that said, you shouldn't have gone low? You were kind of dirty. And he said, listen, like, if I go high, Nick Chubb's going to, one, run me over. 2, that's going to put me at risk to get a concussion. And us defensive players have to protect ourselves too. We can only tackle in a certain box, right? Because you can't go high because you're either going to get called for a helmet to helmet, receive a fine. You yourself can be concussed. There's a lot of different things. So it was Nick Chubb has 30 pounds on Minkah, and Minkah had to go low to take him out. Now, the placement of the lower body hit, he was like, I wish I could have done that differently, but it happens. It's these plays happen in milliseconds. I have to make a decision on a dime. I think he specifically said that he would not have done anything differently in terms of the process, going low, trying to get Chubb, all of that. Obviously, felt very sorry for the fact that Nick Chubb got hurt, and everything like that. But he defended himself, said he's not a dirty player. I agree with that. I don't think he's a dirty player. I haven't seen Minkah display dirty player tendencies in the past. And trust me, if you're a fan of the Steelers, like dirty Steelers players, like it's not hard to point out the dirty players on the
Yeah.
Steelers. Like I don't know,
Right.
James Harrison, that's a dirty player, right? He took heads for a living. Ryan Clark, dirty player. Like dirty players are pretty clear to me on the Steelers. I never really felt that Minkah was one. I don't think that was a dirty hit. I know that a lot of people will think that, but listen, if you're a defender in today's game, it is hard to make tackles on bigger, more explosive, and stronger guys. You have to go lower. Unfortunately, that leads to a lot of injuries like high ankle sprains, torn ligaments, and all these things in plays like Nick Chubb. Really unfortunate. It sucks to see that happen. I just don't think that there is much Minkah could have done if he had gone up high. Because listen, Nick
No.
Chubb will run him over. Like I think he's completely right. That's a one-on-one tackle, which is what he thinks is going to happen before Holcomb comes in. That is going to 100% be a touchdown. And then if that happens, everyone's like, "What in the world were you doing, Minkah?" And
Yeah.
that's what happens there. And so, I mean, you're not going to let him score unless I guess you do. In which case, good way to lose your job. So don't do it. I don't know. It's a tough spot to be put in. I don't think it was dirty. I just think Minkah went low, and that was kind of his avenue to bring Chubb down.
We've seen Nick Chubb do that in the past to Minkah when Minkah tried to tackle him high. Like we literally saw a long touchdown run that Nick Chubb has had in the past where Minkah tried to go high on him and he just pushed him over. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way that they're taught now too, especially in these bigger backs, the Derrick Henrys, the Nick Chubbs of the world. You have that lower target. And I'm not like saying that this is like a newer thing with those types of backs either, but especially with the information we have about head injuries now, you're already lowering the target to that point. So you have a very small target as a defender where you're ever trying to take down a runner. I don't know. I don't even know. It's wild to me that it's coming into question. I don't think if he suffers this injury, it's even a question of where he got hit. It's literally only because he suffered the injury that people are talking about it.
Yeah, I I just don't see how that is a dirty hit. Um, I understand people are upset at the injury outcome and what happened,
Yeah,
but I don't know how it's dirty. I mean, Nick Chubb is one of the best runners in terms of just getting that leg drive going and getting those hidden yardage. That's kind of what makes him great. He can turn 4 into 8 just because of that. I mean, they tackled him on what, like the 3-yard line? Like he tackles him high, Nick Chubb probably just runs through him and takes him to the end zone. I
yeah.
don't know. I think it's a tough spot to be in if you're Minkah. I don't think it is inherently dirty.
No, no. But a lot of people are throwing that around. There's been a lot of stupid stuff on the internet. Here's something else that's stupid, totally unrelated to that situation. Mike Florio was talking about George Pickens' involvement in the offense and said he doesn't believe that he is a focal point because they want to avoid a contractual monster. Um, what what are we doing? Are we serious? Nick, what's going on with this? What is Florio talking about?
Florio has I'll say this. Florio has a contention right there for the worst take Steelers related of the year.
That's
Um, there are some bad takes that were out there during like training camp and all of that, and that's what happens with the hysteria of training camp. But saying that they are literally intentionally decreasing George Pickens' targets so he does not get paid heavily is one of the most bogus things ever. Like let's think through that logically. Okay, your young superstar receiver, who by the way gets mad like every time he doesn't get 10 targets a game, If that happens, he's going to blow up and probably ask for a trade. So you lose George Pickens at some point. So there's one. Two, Matt Canada is intentionally not getting targets to George Pickens when he's going to get fired if he keeps doing this, right? Matt Canada's just like, yeah, I can get fired because the Steelers won't have to pay George Pickens $30 million a year 2 years from now. Like, yeah, that's what's going on. Mike Tomlin strictly decided that one of his budding young superstar receivers was not going to be involved and thus hurt his young quarterback that he hopes is a franchise quarterback. The franchise quarterback that you hope Kenny Pickett is cannot throw to his best receiver on the field right now, who is George Pickens. That's exactly what's happening. And then two, we are going to waste the last few good years of Cam Hayward. We are going to waste away the top prime of TJ Watt, the top prime of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and this entire defense, and we are going to just ignore George Pickens. What a ridiculous take this is. Like, Florio has some like pretty solid out of the box thoughts sometimes, I think. Like, I think he's been on some things before and anything has happened. But that one, I mean, there has to be a logical chain to these thoughts. There's no logical chain to that. There is none. The only way that would be a logical thought is if Art Rooney himself came down and told them, don't get George Pickens targets. That is the only way that would happen. And clearly, Rooney doesn't have an issue paying guys $30 million a year. He's doing it for TJ Watt, basically. I mean, Steelers have never really been a team that has been shy about doling out large cap hits and large contracts for their top players. So I don't get that at all. It's wild to me. The reason George Pickens doesn't get targets is two reasons. One, Matt Canada isn't very good at his job. Two, largely because before this year, he hadn't been separating. And so separators get targets, and that's Deontay Johnson. But George Pickens was open a lot on Sunday, and he suddenly goes for 10 targets. That's not a coincidence, but there's no conspiracy theory about it. It's very easily explained. That has a possibility to be the worst take of the year. I think it is. I can't think of one right off the rip that is worse.
Yeah, it's a terrible take at any time. I find it even funnier in the absence of Deontay Johnson that they would be just absolving George Pickens from the offense. Who are you throwing the ball to then? Who's getting the ball if it's not going to be George Pickens within a Deontay Johnsonless offense?
And he was like by far the highest target getter. Like, it wasn't even close. Like, if I remember correctly, he had 10 targets. Like, the rest of the offense had like 9 or something, or maybe it was like the rest of receivers or something. Like, it wasn't even close. Like, George Pickens was absolutely decisively the first read on like there was a stat, it's called first read percentage. It's a fantasy football stat usually used for, kind of looking at who's going to get volume and targets, but like Pickens was like 70%, and it was like third highest in the league or something this week. Like, they wanted to get him the football.
Yeah, he had 10 targets. Jalen Warren was next with 6. Calvin Austin 4, Robinson 3, Harris 3, and then Boykin, Freiermuth, and Gunner 1. I was going to say, if you were to have that take about somebody within the Steelers offense, Pat Freiermuth has 2 targets through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not that I believe that. That's still BS, but like, if you're going to have it about somebody.
So like the rest of the receiver room had 9 from what the numbers you said. Like, they clearly dialed up those shots for Pickens. I don't understand what the thought process was with when that take came out. Wild take to me. Regardless, George Pickens also talked today and basically said nothing of note, but kind of feels like he is making a statement that he can separate and can become a wide receiver 1 in this league, which
he's beating the Mike Williams allegations.
Yes, the Mike Williams allegations are starting to be beaten. If you look at that tape of what he did against Denzel Ward and in that game, he was beating Denzel Ward a lot more than I thought he would, man. He was really good. That was a fringe wide receiver 1 performance he put up on Monday. He passed the test very well in his first game.
Pretty wild stuff from Florio. Also, Matt Canada speaking today, and maybe he said Al and I have talked in the past about just like how he says very little, like very boring press conferences. What is your take on that first and foremost in terms of just Matt Canada's press conferences? And then I want to dive into some of the stuff because you specifically asked him about play action.
Well, listen, Zach, I appreciate your question, but uh, that's his favorite phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's pretty uneventful. Today, I actually thought it was quite eventful.
Hmm.
In that he did not give enough answers to a lot of questions, or that his answers that he did give were plain out wrong. For example, like he was asked about that 3rd and 1 run with Kenny that everyone knows is a terrible call in that spot.
Hmm.
And literally he was asked, why call that? And he was like, I can't reveal that. I can't talk about that. So what went wrong? I'm not going to reveal it, but it was a bad play. We got to own it. That's what he said. And then later on went on to explain the George Pickens touchdown play, progression to progression, like in detail about the coverage they faced, which is just funny. I just thought that was a contradiction. But Matt Canada's press conferences are not usually very eventful. This one was just because, like he was asked how they get their mojo back, and straight up just started the answer with "I don't know." Like great to hear from your offensive coordinator. How do you
Yeah.
get the offense
A lot
back?
of faith.
I don't know. Just great
If you
answer.
got any ideas, tell me. Yeah.
No, I thought today was like one of the more eventful press conferences, and the fact that I think Canada really put himself out there and kind of didn't look very good for it. Responded to the fans' chants as well for Fire Canada. Heard kind of just canned in Mike Tomlin's response, the same thing, and
Hmm.
was like, "Love the fans' passion. We do got to get better. We understand this. It starts from an execution standpoint." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever. That's a canned response, but very, very, very weird press conference today from Matt Canada. I'll say that." And Allen wasn't there, and usually he is
Yeah.
there on Thursdays. So
Hmm.
usually I'm usually with TA. I'm usually with Terrell Austin over the defensive side, but I hung out with Canada today. So this was really like my first real exposure to a Matt Canada press conference or a regular season this year, and can't say it disappointed.
Well, maybe that's what we need for it to be more eventful is Nick Farabaugh in Canada's room. I wanted to. You said about the play action stuff though. That's what you asked him about, and his comments on it kind of contradict the data that we literally have in front of us in terms of the way that play action works. I think he said something along the lines of you have to get the running game going in order for it to become effective. There's some things there. I don't think our protection was bad on some of the play actions, and we took some shots. But really, like that run game part is what's sticking with me. What is your take on that in terms of play action only works if you get the run game going?
Well, it's completely wrong. His full comments are, I think play action is something, you got to get the run game going more and more. It becomes effective. That's something that becomes more and more of a real situation with our run game. So that was a play. Then he goes on to basically
Yeah.
describe what I said about the GP touchdown and how it
Hmm.
allowed them, because I believe the GP touchdown came off a series where they had run some nice plays off that, and like just a few yards in the run game. And then he basically says he didn't think the protection was bad, but that they need to be more balanced in order to use more play action. Um, just a really the last part of that statement is probably right. They probably do need to be more balanced to run more play action.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure you saw the Warren Sharp video from today where he
Yes, I did.
breaks down the splits of run to pass. The Steelers pass the ball 82% of the time out of shotgun, only run 18% of the
In
time.
a league of their own right now. Yep.
Yeah, and then under center, I believe they run the ball 90% of the time, which is just absurd. You are basically telegraphing what you are doing by the very formation you are in. So that is wild to me in terms of that. And they are dead last in running play action, but they ran like 4 or 5 of them against the Browns, and all of them went for really good yardage. The 71-yard touchdown was a play action play. Pickens had another, I think, about 25-yarder on an over route there. They had a number of good plays off play action. So I do not understand why they don't run more, but he's completely wrong about needing the run game. Like, sure, it helps, right? Like, I think the Titans under Arthur Smith are like a great example of a run game helping the passing game and that play action game going, because you always had to worry about Derrick Henry. And then when you started to really key on Derrick Henry, they would pull it back at A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown would take it 80 yards. I think that is like one of the things that can get things going. But across the league, you do not need that. The Chiefs are a great example of this. The Chiefs do not run the ball that well. They are not a dynamic run game. They can run it, but they're not some elite rushing team. You're not like that worried about Isaiah Pacheco, right, and Jerick McKinnon. You're worried about Patrick Mahomes, and yet he turns his back, does a few play actions, and can hit whoever he wants. You do not need a good run game to have a good play action game. This is true. We know this is true. The data says it. It's not just a short data size either. It's like a decade-long sample size for all 32 teams that showcases this. This is a complete wrong statement. If you are in 2023 saying that you need a run game to run play action, man, you need to catch up with the times. There's so much data out there. It's not even really that new. I think the data's been out there for at least a half decade at this point. So any guy that is dialed in as much as an offensive coordinator in the NFL should know that is not a true statement. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty indicting of Matt Canada. Just kind of confirming your priors, if you will. I don't think most people think he's a very good play caller right now, but that kind of points to you as to why. They run an archaic offense in large ways. Remember, came in, was touted for his motion, basically got rid of all the motion, thinking that would help the pro style of the offense. But honestly, they need the motion back more. They need to run that motion more. He ran motion more than anyone in college football. Comes to the NFL, and it's basically not been in there aside from the jet sweeps. Like, they run some of the least motion in the NFL. They run almost no play action. They telegraph plays before the play. Their route concepts are almost all outside the numbers. Like, the first read for Kenny Pickett is almost always outside the numbers. It's not the dig route. It's not the over route. It is that 7 route. It is that curl route on the outside. It is that. And so I'm not going to act like Matt Canada. And I tweeted this out earlier, or zeeted it out. I don't know, whatever you say with X.
Yeah, that sounds terrible, but
Yeah, zeeted it out. I don't know. But what I said was, listen, the offense doesn't get this bad with just Matt Canada, but the man has not done a single thing to help that offense, and he has not done much to not point to evidence to say he's hurting it. He is absolutely hurting this offense. The players are not playing well right now. There's no doubt. The offensive line looks like crap. Kenny Pickett can't hit the right side of a barn right now. He's bailing on pockets. The run game is non-existent, and their receiving core is banged up. That's true, but man, if you watch the tape, you can see these guys aren't being put in great positions either. I don't feel like he's done much to help Kenny Pickett get out of the slump, is what I will say. No play action, no motion. The throws over the middle of the field that are there, I feel like Kenny is hit for the most part, aside from the weird slant routes. I don't know why Kenny Pickett can't hit a slant route right now. But I don't feel like he's helped out Kenny Pickett at all. So I think it's exacerbated these last 2 games of his struggles, because it feels like, oh, here's an easy play for you, Kenny. Like, let's get this going. And a lot of it just hasn't been there.
I like things that you feel like Kenny should be exceeding at, they're not doing. Like, I just don't understand how, as an offensive coordinator, you can completely bail and not create an offense around this type of quarterback that you're trying to see if he can be the guy at this level. You're talking about not using motion, not using play action, things that Kenny Pickett you would think would excel in, or at least be able to run an offense that uses those. The easiest thing you can do for a quarterback that's still trying to learn the NFL and read defenses, put guys in motion so he can figure out if they're in man or zone. They're not using motion at all. Like, what are we doing here with this offense? I don't understand what the plan is. I don't know if there is one. I actually just want to be a fly on the wall in these offensive meetings.
It is a wild kind of encapsulation of everything that is wrong with the Steelers offense right now. The schematics of it are so just archaic, which is so weird for Matt Canada, because he was so ahead of the curve in motion. Like, he's one of the guys that first pointed to motion as like this big thing that can really toy with defense's eyes, give you a lot of different advantages here and there. And yet he hasn't done anything to kind of carry that over to the NFL. Now, some of that is that the NFL's motion rules kind of hurt his motion game. When he's sending like 3 tight ends in motion on the same side, like that's a little crazy. But dude, like you watch his college tape, and I'm not gonna act like he was like a great college OC, but when he was at his height with Pitt and at Wisconsin, like what they did so well was they used that motion to move the eyes of the linebackers to work a passing game with play action off it. There were things in that playbook that would really help Kenny Pickett right now. So I don't know what Matt Canada did when he went to the NFL and said, yeah, let me get rid of all that motion. Because remember, we were expecting the Steelers to go from about 30th in motion usage with Randy Fichtner to probably up to like top 10, top 5 levels of it.
Mm-hmm.
They've been, I think, since Matt Canada took over, like the 28th most used motion in the league. Like that is just a bad, bad, bad sign. Now, the fact that it has happened over 2 offensive coordinators does make you question if there's implementation from maybe Mike Tomlin that he doesn't like that. But I don't know, man. Like Canada, anytime he's asked about motion too, is like, to become more pro style, I got rid of this and I did this and this. And it did not make much sense. And a lot of what he does schematically doesn't make sense. They run about 10 concepts in terms of passing plays from different looks. It's got to be the least amount of passing concepts in an NFL playbook.
You mentioned, I want to ask, maybe dive a little bit more into that post that you had on X regarding the Steelers offense, because I feel like, we've beaten the Canada stuff to a point where it's like, why are we still talking about it? But I think, you and I haven't necessarily had a conversation on here, I don't think, about it really, that I keep telling people, and it almost sounds like I'm defending Canada, and I'm absolutely not. But you mentioned it's not obviously all on him. Like with all the issues that lie within the Steelers offense, it can't just all be pointed to the coordinator. Kenny's not hitting open receivers. The offensive line hasn't been good enough. The performance from everybody on the offense really just hasn't been up to snuff so far this season. What have you seen when watching them through 2 games that you would say, okay, this is, an offensive coordinator issue as opposed to this is a personnel issue?
As we kind of said, just the route concepts are not good. The passing game concepts are banal. Everyone's seeing it. It's scat hank, it's spacing, it's basic stuff that every team runs. But the Steelers try to run it out of different looks, trying to think they're nifty. But you can key in on that when I think it could work. I'll say this: I think it can work. The fact that they only run like 10 to 12 passing concepts, it itself isn't great, but there are guys that when they work with rookie quarterbacks, for example, or second-year quarterbacks that are struggling, really kind of water down the amount of passing concepts they do. So it can work, but it can only work if you're doing motion, if you're dressing it up in that way, if you're doing play action. Like for example, run a dagger concept, right? They run dagger in the Steelers offense. They do. Run that out of play action and hit it, under center. They don't do that. They don't do any of that. So everything might be, they might switch sides or a formation. It might not be out of a stacked look. It might be that out of a bunch look, but defenses can easily process that to a point. It's not hard to do that. The play calls situationally are not there either. 2nd and 10 runs with a run game that isn't very good. Tosses with Najee on 2nd and 12. Different things like that. Like using Najee Harris as a lateral runner rather than just getting him north and south to run between the tackles. Like that's something. Alex Kozora, I believe, said that they just don't pull guards. I think that's something to note. If your zone runs aren't working, well, why not pull one of the guards? Let's see how counter works and how power works and how these different things work. It's in the playbook. They just don't run it. So it's really a combination of, all right, this is my plan here, and this is what I'm going to do, and then not deviating from it at all. He doesn't really deviate from a plan in game. He just kind of runs the same things over and over and over. It's like insanity because they don't do anything to help the players. I think that's the biggest thing. And it needs to become something. I think when Mike Tomlin made this comment on Tuesday when he was talking about how coaches need to kind of look at schematics and really adjust and see what's coming, right? They need to kind of adapt in game on the fly. He thought that was a real kind of weakness. I think some of it's on the defensive side of the ball because he included himself there, but I couldn't help but read that one and say, man, that's not a little bit of a dig at the offense because they don't adapt. They don't do anything to respond to much of anything. So I think that is specifically why it's an offensive coordinator issue at his most. Now, if he's fired, I'll say that. If you say he gets fired next week, I don't think this offense suddenly becomes great. I don't think they become like a great offense, but
Right.
I think it'd be easier to watch and certainly better if they can get a competent play caller here than it is right now. But they definitely have problems deeper than Matt Canada, but he's probably the worst of them.
Another problem that they're going to have on Sunday night, and this is the last thing I want to touch on with you, Nick, is Maxx Crosby, who's one of my favorite pass rushers in the game. I really like the plan, his pass rush plan that he attacks with. Also, not necessarily a super heralded guy, like a fourth round pick, and just his story of sobriety and stuff like that. I think he's an easy guy to root for. But on the football field, just an insane talent as well. How is he different from the elite edge rushers that we've seen here early on, and the Nick Bosa's, the Myles Garrett? I'll even throw Zadarius Smith in there as well. Myles Garrett's teammate on the Cleveland Browns. How does a guy like Maxx Crosby stack up compared to those guys, and what makes him different?
Crosby is such a fantastic athlete with great hand usage. He's not as freaky athletically as a Bosa or a Garrett, who is just a freak with all that technical ability, but he is a really good athlete and he's got great bend. I think that's what really makes him quite good. Very similar to Brian Burns in that fact, where he's a great athlete, not quite a Garrett Bosa level athlete, but a fantastic one. And a great bend allows him to get around that edge and allows him to do a lot of different things. He can work power off that because you're going to try and get a speed rush. He's a great run defender. I don't think he's quite as dynamic as Garrett and Bosa because Garrett and Bosa line up kind of, over the A gap and can do a lot of those things. He doesn't really do that. He kind of sticks on one side too. Very kind of TJ Wattish in that way, where he kind of sticks on one side. But man, he is a technician at heart, and he's a guy that blows you up with that technique. You never know what's coming. He's great at kind of anticipating sets and reading off them and having counters to your counters. Very polished in terms of everything he does and just understands the game at a very in-depth level. He kind of has that sixth instinct that you talk about where he kind of goes and just kind of reads the game as it's going on and can react to it. Watching that film does that, but it's just a feel thing. He's a great player, man. Really is. He's not as good as Bosa and Garrett, but like he ain't far off. He's in that upper tier 2, bottom tier 1 level of guys. He can wreck your game real quick if you don't play him well. So Chuks Okorafor is going to have to step up in this one.
Yeah, that's who, to your point, really doesn't switch sides. So Chuks Okorafor probably will be tasked with that assignment. I think what impresses me so much about him too is just like I know that, and we're not going to see Chandler Jones, non-football reasons, obviously thinking about him in that situation, really weird stuff going on, but praying for the best there. But they do have a first-round pick in Tyreek Wilson that we could see. He hasn't done a whole lot through his first 2 games here. But my point there was Maxx Crosby, other than obviously a little bit of limited time here with Chandler Jones, hasn't necessarily had, been playing with the most elite talent on that defensive side of the football either, where he is going to be the focal point each and every time that somebody plays against the Raiders. And yet he still does get his every single time.
Yeah, I think that is really what makes him special because he doesn't need that help. It's not like, Chandler Jones, as he says, is not there. Tyree
Even
Wilson,
so, he's not at the same level as he once was,
yeah,
Chandler
he's
Jones.
not either.
But
Tyree
yeah.
Wilson's an intriguing rookie, and Malcolm Kuntz is decent
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the depth, but like it's not a great group outside of him. And the interior D line is like fine, but you're not gonna like be like, whoa, look at those names and wow, it's not even like a Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris level. Like, okay, Jerry Tillery's fine. Like Bilal Nichols is fine. Like those guys are fine, but they're really not that great. And so
Mm-hmm.
you look at where he gets his production. It's really all through him. He defeats double teams. He can defeat chips. He understands angles, rush angles extremely well, which allows him to finish at a high rate. Like you look at his pressures to sack ratio, and everyone that might be in an analytics community would say, oh, he's due to receive, but he's not, because he's got great rush angles and he understands how to finish around the arc. So he's great at doing that. Very impact player. Everyone's favorite stat, pass rush win rate. He is a very, very high leader in that. I think he's third right now, I believe, in that metric. So he's great there. He's a great player, man. And he just has so many different nuances that even by himself, he is a game wrecker. And so you better watch out, because he is a guy that without any help on that side, they need to help Chooks in this game in some regard. He will destroy a game, run game, pass game, whatever.
Yeah, and that's why it was big for Darnell Washington to get back on the practice field today. Hopefully get him out there Sunday night to be able to help chip out with him. Nick, tell the people where they can find you before we get out of here.
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter, Farabaugh FB. Read the stuff at Steelers Now, of course, and so much more, folks.
Yep, and I'm Zachary Smith, PGH. Be sure to subscribe here, leave us a like, hit that notification bell, whether it's for Steelers Afternoon Drive, Sights and Sounds, Matt and Derek's pregame scout stuff that they've been doing every Saturday before the game, all that good stuff, all that content here. Nick, Alan, Derek, and everybody else at the site, go check that stuff out as well. Obviously, the links to all that stuff is always in the description. If you're not on YouTube, leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening. Thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.